He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host Taylor, and first and foremost, I'm glad that last week I said tentative regarding this being a Bigfoot vocalization research episode, because it just so happens it is not that. Reuben was too busy to catch for a recording on his research. He's busy. He's got a lot of stuff going on. I got lots of stuff going on. Just what happens when you get older. But you know what? We're going to make time. I'm on his butt about it because what he found out and what he was looking into, it needs to be discussed. It's really good stuff to be talking about. And I'm excited to learn more and to get his thoughts shared with all of you guys. So you can stay tuned for that because I'm on his case. But leading up to that episode, I got a few more Sasquatch experiences that I will be sharing in another upcoming episode. I'm just kind of organizing it all and sorting it out. But until then, I stumbled upon something that I was somewhat baffled about, actually. I completely forgotten about this until I was just digging through an old hard drive and found this and remembered doing this project back in school. So for a little context, back in high school, we had to do a school project for English studies, and the topic was free range, whatever you want. Well, my little version of myself took it upon themselves to investigate the famous Roswell incident. Now, I wrote a whole report out on this event, and it's a little messy, but it's not bad. The report is maybe almost 2 decades old, so naturally I wanted to build an episode around this, and I thought, well, do I fact check myself? Do I just recite my old notes? Well, I spruced some things up, and I'm going to kind of do both. I'm going to see how well informed my younger self was, as well as see how this information has changed over the many years. So let's begin. And I quote, "In summer of 1947, an object of unknown origin was recovered from Roswell in New Mexico. Ever since the late 1970s, this incident has gained so much suspicion and rumor of what really happened. The United States Armed Forces came and recovered this unknown object and released some information about it, but was insufficient evidence to support the fact that this was indeed an alien craft from outer space. Many witnesses to this event came forward and revealed their side of the story, as well as some military personnel talking about what happened. It is still unknown what crash landed and if there were any bodies recovered and where they and their craft would have been taken to." The headline edition, July 8th, 1947, "The Army Air Force has announced that a flying disc has been found and is in known possession of the Army." Deadline edition, 1947. The Roswell incident took place over 65 years ago. And even though many UFO researchers ignored this event, until a physicist and UFOologist, Stanton T. Friedman, interviewed Jesse Marcel, who was involved with the original recovery of the debris in 1947, Marcel strongly believed that the military covered up the recovery of an alien spacecraft. His belief quickly spread to other UFO researchers and even some UFO documentaries. In 1980, a famous supermarket tabloid interviewed Marcel, attracting huge attention towards the Roswell incident. It's still unknown where this mysterious object came from, and even though over the years many of the rumors have changed, many witnesses' stories all seem to connect to each other in some way or another. Days after the unknown object crash landed, the U.S. military had issued a press release stating that an unknown disc-shaped craft was recovered from Roswell. Although shortly after, the military retracted this and dismissed the possibility of there being an alien craft in the military's possession. The press then released a different paper stating that a weather balloon had crash landed and was immediately recovered by military personnel. Not until 3 decades after the incident would people start to examine and dig deeper into this mysterious event. Even though many military personnel tried to convince the public that this event was not UFO related, it only strengthened this belief for many Americans. When the press released the paper explaining that the military had recovered a flying disc and showed pictures of soldiers handling and examining metal objects, this started the whole controversy. General Roger Ramey of the U.S. military released information which he stated that was the real truth of the Roswell incident. He addressed the public in Fort Worth, Texas, that the object was just a downed weather balloon. As years went by, though, a man named George Filer interviewed many U.S. Army generals and even interviewed Roger Ramey's wife, who never admitted to knowing anything about aliens, but she did say that her husband, Roger Ramey, was upset and embarrassed about having to lie about the weather balloon story. End quote. So, not badly written. I'd be lying if I didn't fix a few grammar mistakes before reading it, but there are a few things in there that still stack up. And after doing a little bit more research and starting at the beginning, of course, the event, the date checks out. June and July of 1947, things started to get really weird surrounding this mysterious crash in Roswell, New Mexico. And then officially, United States Army Air Force's balloon crashed down as part of a series of tests in remote detection of Soviet nuclear tests. But officially redacted, the Army of the United States recovered a flying disc. And this report landed headlines internationally, but as I quoted in my report, less than 24 hours had actually passed before the story was pulled back and changed to a conventional weather balloon story. Hypothetically, let's say this is without a doubt a UFO UAP. I just think, wouldn't that be kind of funny if the government's go-to cover-up is just a weather balloon? It's almost like we saw this same scenario within the past couple of years across North America. But of course, that's all hypothetical. If we are to believe the governments that be, I understand humans make mistakes, especially the more you go back in time. While we are certainly not devoid of making mistakes these days, the general idea that a powerful entity such as the United States military could make an incorrect deduction after an investigation of a crashed object and see to it being published, but only redacted because they've concluded it's very different, it seems just beyond abnormal for them. It doesn't stack up, but I digress. Let's highlight a few of the names mentioned in here, notably Jesse Marcel. Now, he served in the United States Air Force as an officer, and after retiring, that's when he had come forward in 1978 with claims that the Army's supposed weather balloon that they recovered was all, in fact, a cover story. And they even went as far as saying that the debris was indeed extraterrestrial in origin. Now, a little backstory on this individual. He enlisted with the Louisiana National Guard in 1924, and once World War II began, he ended up joining the Air Force and eventually attained the rank of lieutenant colonel. After several victories and accolades in his career, in 1946, he was attached to the 509th Composite Group in preparation for Operation Crossroads. Now, that was basically the preparation and testing of the atomic bombs. In my opinion, this is a huge thing to have on your resume, and I say that lightly and not necessarily as a compliment. What I mean by it is that having someone involved in that project and that mission objective to me means that an individual has certain qualities, dedication to their government, country, and mission. They understand the meaning of secrecy, classified. So why after such secrecy and historical accolades would they come forward with a lie about Roswell? It can't be to seek a public popularity by any means. It can't be to enhance your position in your career. You've already attained a high rank. You have really powerful accolades and achievements behind your name. So what is the general point here? I personally feel like it comes down to just being truthful, but I'm not there. I've not met this man. So that doesn't have a strong basis and foundation being my opinion. It's only what I can deduce based on what I know. And I'm sure you listening, you would form your own deduction just like I have. All I can do is present this information to you to help you reach your own conclusion. Now, getting back to this, after the debris was all recovered and moved, he went to Texas to participate in a press conference where the debris was publicly announced as debris from a balloon. But it wasn't until the late 1970s where an interview with Marcel was aired on TV, and I quote, "They wanted some comments from me, but I wasn't at liberty to do that. So all I could do is keep my mouth shut, and General Ramey is the one who discussed. Told the newspapers, the newsmen, what it was, and to forget about it. It's nothing more than a weather observation balloon. Of course, we both knew differently." End quote. So there's a callback there to General Ramey, and we know with his wife too that he did have some regrets about this conference, and now we can see here too, based on reports from Marcel, that there's certain things that he was trying to rectify and come forward with and change, and he just did not really seem to enjoy this conversation with the press, and he wasn't allowed to really say much. So I find it really funny how similar this is to our incidents that people have forgotten about a couple years ago. Now, Marcel's son had spent the majority of his life stating that in 1947, when he was only 10 years old, his father apparently showed him a few recovered pieces of debris from the Roswell crash site. And I quote, "a small beam with purple-hued hieroglyphics on it," end quote. Now, if you're watching the YouTube version, I have this moment right here, a photo of the original newspaper article, just for reviewing, just so you can kind of see it. Otherwise, you can view it and my show notes on our website's blog that'll get posted on there at CryptidClues.ca. One other name mentioned prior, Stanton T. Friedman. And he unfortunately passed away a few years ago in 2019, but he had a very powerful impact on the UFO UAP community. He spent 14 years as a nuclear physicist for several companies such as General Electric, Aerojet, General Nucleonics, General Motors, and more like McDonnell Douglas. And at his time with McDonnell Douglas, he worked on advanced classified programs with nuclear aircraft, fission and fusion rockets, and even compact nuclear power plants for space applications. And then come the 1970s, Friedman left his full-time employment working as a physicist to explore the scientific investigations of UFOs and UAPs. He's given hundreds of lectures across 50 states, 10 provinces, and 19 countries. He's published over 80 UFO-related papers and displayed a consistent, favorable use of the term flying saucer in his workings. The reason he is important to Roswell and this whole incident is because he was, in fact, the first civilian to actually document the site. And aside from having heavy support on the hypothesis on the idea of it being a genuine spaceship crash, in 1968, he came forward and told a committee of the United States House of Representatives that the evidence suggests that Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial vehicles. And Friedman also hypothesized that UFO UAPs may originate from relatively nearby sun-like stars. He called out SETI a couple times as well when I was digging into some of his reports, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And I find it interesting how he called them out in the sense that they are looking for signals, not necessarily other things that would kind of fit into the category of being UFO, UAP related, actual living entities and whatnot, just the signals. So I just thought I would mention that real quick, but I digress. He didn't stop believing in the notion that the event at Roswell was indeed of extraterrestrial origins. But interest at Roswell, like I mentioned in that report I quoted, it started to fade away. And after nearly 30 years since the incident, it just people were fading off of it. Once the government provided a bare bones reason for what that crash was, people started to let it go. And once the Twin Falls saucer hoax occurred, it really became a dismissed idea. Even though sightings were popping up everywhere, just to shed some light on that hoax, though. Firstly, the Twin Falls, Idaho, United States, July 11th, 1947. There were reports of flying discs that were becoming more common, especially coming hot off the wreckage of this Roswell incident. People were just saying that they saw stuff everywhere. And residents of Twin Falls claimed to have seen something and began calling it in. And I quote, a disc. Now, this gained attention so fast that the FBI and Army officials arrived on scene very, very promptly, and they took possession of the reported disc. It was quickly proclaimed a hoax, while the press reporting it as teenagers creating a hoax. I believe from what I found that it was just audio pieces pulled from a jukebox that these teenagers used to create this disc-like object. But Idaho was subject to additional reports in the following weeks, but only sightings. There was nothing like Roswell with anything crash landing. So the things that we've discussed here, albeit decades ago, it still shares some common notions of what's happening today. If we look at the UFO congressional hearing that took place a few months ago, we can observe certain need-to-know concepts that form between the people, the government of the people, and again, the private sectors that the government turns to. It's a very weird hierarchy, but it's not one, in my opinion, for the good and betterment of humanity. It's very much, it feels like a shackle sometimes, and maybe I'm just being a little too optimistically negative, if that such a term exists. But I see it as humanity could be a powerhouse, but we limit ourselves. Why do we limit ourselves? Is it because we're afraid of what we could become? Is it afraid of what dangerous things we could do. I like to think that humanity has the ability to really, really better themselves and become a powerhouse in a galactic scale. But maybe that's what some people are afraid of. And unfortunately, those people that are afraid of it are the ones in power and are the ones doing the research on these things. But that is one tiny grain of sand in a large, large sandbox. As we transition to the next part of the episode here, I will quote a few things from my old report that stood out to me. Firstly, being a quote from Friedman. People need to recognize that the real situation about where we fit in the scheme of things is very different from the way it's being portrayed. In my view of what's going on, there are loads of civilizations out there all over the place, and that we're not very significant. End quote. And lastly, rumors of spaceship debris was not the only thing supposedly found in the Roswell incident. And I quote, many witnesses report seeing bodies approximately 3 to 4 feet tall, with 4 fingers and no thumbs on their hands. They had finely featured faces and did not resemble the big-eyed gray aliens shown on TV and other types of media. Later on, after the military had arrived and apparently salvaged what remained of the crash site, including 4 unknown deceased life forms, whatever autopsies that were done on the bodies were kept classified. End quote. Now, the results, any and all, are very convoluted, and I wish I had a concrete answer for you when it comes to these alien bodies that were supposedly recovered. It's a whole can of worms. But what I can say from my report above is that the general description of these alien bodies seemed to be pretty consistent with a variety of reports, both from folks that were living nearby and folks that worked on the recovery of the debris. The thing is, though, that I feel like the information changes where there were some bodies that were deceased, but one body that was still alive and taken in. Finding the truth on that is... I don't have that classification. And it takes someone who's much more well-informed than I am, probably leading the charge on those UFO-UAP congressional hearings. But moving on, and I quote, I saw bodies that looked Asian in appearance, had large heads, no hair, and a yellowy tinge to their skin. Sergeant Melvin E. Brown. End quote. So aside from a few extra miscellaneous quotes on my report, the information overall checks out pretty well, I'd say. Relevant and proved to be a very enlightening reread regarding what I said earlier, history repeating itself. All this information is very important, and there are people that I've spoken to that aren't familiar with Roswell. And I believe it serves as a very historical event in our history that has, in my opinion, a strong chance of being something hidden behind a lot of red tape. There's still truth hidden regarding the entire event, and perhaps someday, if more of these congressional UFO, UAP hearings can take place, gathering more public attention and support, then maybe we'll get the truth at long last regarding what really happened back in the summer of 1947, Roswell, New Mexico. It's just going to take some time. And hopefully our lifetime we'll get to know the truth. But it does terrify me a little bit. Is history always doomed to repeat itself if you keep making the same mistakes again and again? And with what happened not too long ago with all of those weather balloons flying over North America, it's very, very peculiar. And so with that, I will conclude it there. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Cryptid Clues. Remember, you can find us on social media, X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and if you ever want to reach us out directly, you can via our email, cryptidclues@gmail.com. We got the ad-free episodes dropping on Patreon as well. So until next time, everyone, take care and stay safe.